Hey everyone! Well, as I get ready to work on a new O-gauge switching layout project and eventually get going on another N-scale project or two, I thought I would look at some of the layout projects that I never actually built but kind of always wanted to. These are layouts that over the course of the years kind of were ones that I thought about building but just didn't quite ever get around to building, or building similar layouts to them that I never actually built. So anyway, let's take a look at some of these N and HO scale layout projects that almost got built but never did. So anyway, first up here is this Sassi layout. This is one of the earlier books that I bought when I was younger, and I really like this layout design. This was a 4x8 foot HO scale layout project that he did a book on. However, my idea was to do the same layout but in N scale. So just maybe 2x4 feet or a little bit bigger than that. And it would be, I think, a really fun N-scale project to have a layout like this. One nice feature was it did have those two tracks going off to the left-hand side, so you could expand it with staging and things like that pretty easily, or expand it into something larger as well. But anyway, I thought this was a fun layout design. You have a lot of industries to switch. There's a town area. You got some nice terrain there. So kind of a New England theme, and it would just be a fun layout to do, especially maybe with fall colors and things like that. So never know, maybe this will show up again as a future project that I build, in the coming years. Now this is a 4x8 foot layout project as well that was in one of those track planning books that I had when I was younger, and this was one that I really always wanted to build but again never did. One of the things I liked about it was that you did have sort of a large switching area at the top of the layout, but you had also a long run to get there from the interchange area on the bottom left. So this layout basically you had to do a couple laps around the layout just to get up to the switching area, and there's a lot of vertical elevation change, and that's something that I always like to include in a lot of my layouts, is just a lot of vertical change. So track at the top of this layout you can see is 6.5 inches above the track at the lower level, so that's a nice vertical difference. And again, this would be a fun project to do in N scale as well. So this is actually one that I might consider doing more so than the first one, just because, again, you do have that long run to get up towards that switching area. So it would just be fun to have a situation where you're pulling cars from the interchange and you have a long trip to get up to the switching area and then back down again. I think it'd just be kind of a fun layout to operate. Probably would make some modifications to this just to make it a little bit easier for the operational side of things. So again, if this was an N scale layout, I could make it a little bit larger than 2x4 feet, go to 2.5x5 or something like that, just to make some of the switching areas work out a little bit easier. Straighten out some of those tracks to where you're not trying to couple cars on curves as much and that kind of thing. But overall, I think this would be a fun project to do at some point in the future. And if it was slightly larger, you could also reduce some of those grades and make them a little bit easier to pull longer strings of cars up and down too. So that would be an option as well. Now this layout here was one that I've seen multiple times when I was younger. It may have even appeared in like a Boys Life magazine or something like that. I can't remember, but it was in various track planning books that I saw, and it was one that I thought would be a lot of fun to do because you do get a continuous run. You do have a lot of switching operations. But anyway, when I was younger, I thought this would be a fun project to build. The problem was it did have a lot of turnouts, and of course turnouts are expensive relative to other track pieces. And overall, it's kind of a complex setup in terms of needing a lot of different types of track pieces and so forth. And so I never really built it when I was younger, but it's still one that I think about building, whether it's an HO or N scale. However, I would do some modifications to this. Having that switch back to get to Getty oil at the bottom, I think is kind of silly. And, it would be better just to probably have another turnout coming off that crossing and just have two separate straight tracks there to not add needless complexity. And I'd probably rearrange things a little bit more to make them a little bit easier to either switch or just have a little bit more space or whatever. But anyway, just kind of a layout you could have a lot of complex switching in a small space. Of course, there's the Model Railroader Salt Lake Route project from several years ago. This is probably my favorite N-scale project that they've done. Again, I've done some designs on this, and I have it on the website where I've made some modifications to the track plan to make it work a little bit easier. Just having less of the weird pieces of Kata Unitrack to make everything work. But I think this would still be a fun project to do at some point. So it's just kind of a fun layout. Again, it's not necessarily a practical layout, but certainly for building a display layout that could go to a train show or things like that, it could be a fun project to do. And here's another small HO scale switching layout that I actually kind of like better than that previous one that I showed earlier. You do have a lot of switching operations in a small space, but you still have that continuous loop for when you just want to watch a train run. But this one also gives you the opportunity to have a lot of just town buildings as well. So you get kind of a very urban themed layout, and you could even really expand on this more and maybe add some additional elevation to it in terms of, maybe roads or buildings that are on different levels and the base level of the track, and just kind of make it more of a dense urban theme than what it already is. So this would be a fun project to do in a small space in HO scale, and obviously you could do the same thing in N scale in an even smaller space. And this is actually one that I've considered doing in the past, and I may still go ahead and try to do at some point in the future because it does offer a lot in a very small space. And this layout here is another small HO scale layout that's in the 4x8 foot size. This is basically what Model Railroader did for one of their projects several years ago as well. I think this is a slight variation on that track plan, but it is a very, very similar one. But you can see that generally you do have a lot of operations in a very small space in HO scale. So you have a large yard on one side for, switching out different cuts of coal cars, and then you have a couple different mines that you can go to as well. So again, you do have that continuous run when you want it, but you also have that longer run to get up to the mine truck dumps at the top and come back down with that. So there's a lot you can do with this layout, and obviously if you do add some staging or some additional expansion to this layout like Model Railroader did for their project, you can certainly have a layout that could do a lot in a fairly small space. And again, this could be one of those things that would be kind of fun to do in N scale as well. You could expand this just a little bit from 2x4 feet to, like, again, 2.5 by 5 feet and make everything work pretty much as you see here in N scale without really compromising too much in terms of radius and grades and things like that. And so overall, I think this would be a fun project to do in N scale as well. And so something like this may eventually show up on one of my future projects. So what about you guys? Are there other layout projects that you've always wanted to build but just never did? Or are there layouts that you kind of think that maybe one day you will build? Let me know in the comments. It's kind of a fun thing to kind of just think about different projects you might eventually get around to, or look back at ones that maybe you kind of wanted to build but never did. There's, I'm sure, all kinds of layouts that a lot of people would have liked to have built if they had the time or the money or the space or whatever. Now, most of these layout projects were technically buildable in terms of space. I could have built them, but didn't want to, either because of the configuration of how things would have worked out with them, or just had other ideas that would have been easier to build, or just changed my mind or whatever else. And that happens a lot. You kind of go through a lot of ideas and you kind of go through them and change, and maybe what you decide at the end isn't what you started with, and that's kind of a normal process of things. But yeah, these were just projects that I thought would be fun to build at some point and never did. Maybe one day I'll build a variation on some of these, maybe I won't, who knows. But anyway, it's just kind of fun to look back at some of these layout designs and kind of think about what I might do in the future and what I could have done in the past had I built them, and what they might have turned out like if I had actually gone through and built those projects, or maybe built them in a different scale and things like that. So anyway, that's all for now, and thanks for watching. Bye.